Have you noticed how fast things can change when it comes to retirement support in the UK? In 2024, the government made a major change that caught millions of pensioners by surprise. The winter fuel payment, which many older people had counted on every year to help cover heating bills, was taken away for a large number of households. There was no long lead-up, no gradual rollout, and very little time for people to adjust. For many retirees, this wasn't just another government policy. It was money they had already included in their yearly budget. Depending on their situation, that payment was worth between £200 and £300, and for people living on a fixed income, every pound matters. Losing it meant many households suddenly had to rethink how they would pay for heating, food, and other everyday essentials during the coldest months of the year. But here's the important part. The loss of the winter fuel payment is only one piece of a much bigger problem. It shines a light on something that has been building for years. More and more research is showing that many pensioners simply do not receive enough income to cover the real cost of everyday life. This isn't just based on opinions or headlines. Experts have compared what retirees actually receive with what it realistically costs to maintain a basic standard of living. Their findings show a growing gap between those two numbers, and that gap is becoming harder to ignore. Today we're going to break everything down in simple terms. We'll look at the latest figures, explain why so many people who worked hard and saved throughout their lives are still finding retirement financially difficult, and discuss practical steps that could help protect your finances. Some of these facts may surprise you, especially if you're already retired or plan to retire in the next few years. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Financial rules and government policies can change quickly, and important updates often disappear from the news just as fast as they appear. Staying informed early gives you more time to make smart decisions before changes affect your income. Now let's get into the numbers. One of the most talked about studies on retirement income came from Just Group, a well-known company that focuses on retirement planning. Their research highlighted a serious issue that every pensioner should understand. According to their analysis, someone who depends only on the full UK state pension does not have enough income to cover the full cost of living for an entire year. To explain this, researchers created something called State Pension Shortfall Day. Think of it this way. Imagine taking your yearly state pension and spreading it evenly across all 12 months. Based on today's estimated living costs, your money would run out before the year is over. In other words, there would be several weeks when your pension alone would no longer be enough to meet even basic living expenses. For the 2025-26 period, that date falls on November 22nd. That means someone relying only on the state pension would effectively run out of enough income more than a month before the year ends. The numbers help explain why. For 2026-27, the full new state pension is expected to pay around £12,547.60 a year. However, the Pensions and Lifetime Savings Association, often called the PLSA, estimates that a single retiree needs about £13,400 each year just to reach a minimum acceptable standard of living. Notice the wording here. This isn't the amount needed for luxury vacations, expensive hobbies, or a comfortable retirement filled with extras. This is simply the amount experts believe is needed to cover basic living costs, everyday bills, food, heating, clothing, transportation, and a small amount for unexpected expenses. Even at that basic level, there's a shortfall of more than £1,400 every year. That gap has to be filled somehow. Some people can use private pensions or savings. Others may receive income from investments or part-time work. But many people don't have those options. And that's where the real concern begins. Now let's look at how many people are actually affected. Across the UK, around 1.2 million pensioners depend entirely on the state pension as their only source of income. They don't have a private pension, rental income, or large savings to fall back on. For them, the state pension isn't just one part of their retirement income, it is their entire income. That means every one of those households faces the same basic challenge. The money coming in simply doesn't match the amount experts say is needed for even a modest standard of living. And it's important to understand something here. This isn't about people who wasted money or failed to plan ahead. Many of these pensioners worked for decades, paid taxes, and did exactly what they believed they were supposed to do. They expected the pension system to provide enough support in retirement. Instead, many now find themselves making difficult choices between everyday necessities. For some, it's turning the heating on less often to reduce energy bills. Others cut back on groceries or skip replacing worn-out clothing. Small repairs around the house get delayed because there isn't enough money left after paying the essential bills. When your budget is already stretched, even a small, unexpected expense can create a major problem. A broken washing machine, a higher electricity bill, or emergency home repairs can quickly throw everything off balance. And that's only part of the story. Where you live can make an enormous difference to how far your retirement income goes. Many people assume retirement costs are fairly similar across the country, but the reality is very different. Living expenses can vary dramatically depending on the region. Someone living in London or the Southeast often faces much higher costs than someone living in parts of Northern England, Wales, or Scotland. Housing costs are usually the biggest difference, but they're far from the only one. Council tax, transportation, food prices, utilities, insurance, and many other everyday expenses can all be significantly more expensive depending on where you live. Then there's one of the biggest financial risks many people rarely think about until it's too late: long-term care. If a person reaches a stage where they can no longer live independently, the cost of care can be far higher than most families expect. In London, a place in a residential care home can cost anywhere from £1,500 to £2,000 every week. Over the course of a year, that's roughly £80,000 to £100,000. Now compare that with some areas in the northeast of England, where similar care may cost close to half as much. That's an enormous difference. For retirees who own valuable property in expensive areas, selling their home may provide enough money to help cover those costs, but many pensioners don't have that option. People who rented throughout their working lives or retired with limited savings may have very few financial resources available if they ever need long-term care. In some situations, years of savings can disappear surprisingly fast. Just a few years in residential care could use up most of what someone spent a lifetime building. This is one reason financial experts continue to warn that retirement planning needs to look beyond monthly income alone. It's not just about paying today's bills, it's about preparing for the expenses that may come years later. Unfortunately, many people are still falling behind. Government research estimates that around 43% of working-age adults, roughly 14.6 million people, are currently saving less than they are likely to need for retirement. That's not a small group, it's nearly half of the working population. Recognizing the growing concern, the government brought back the Pensions Commission in 2025 to study the future of retirement in Britain. Their warning was clear. Without meaningful changes, future retirees could end up financially worse off than many of today's pensioners. And this isn't a prediction for people decades away from retirement. It includes people who are now in their 40s and 50s, people who may only have 10 or 15 years left before they stop working. For many families, retirement is approaching much faster than they realize. The choices they make today, how much they save, when they retire, and how they manage their money could have a huge impact on their financial security later. But there's another issue that often catches people by surprise. It's something that almost every retirement plan depends on. And many people underestimate it completely. People are living much longer than previous generations expected. That changes everything. Living longer is something most of us hope for. But from a financial point of view, it also means your retirement savings have to last much longer than many people expect. This is where a lot of retirement plans begin to fall apart. Many people picture retirement lasting 10 or 15 years. They build their budget around that idea without realizing that modern life expectancy tells a very different story. In the UK today, a woman who reaches the age of 70 is expected, on average, to live until around 87 years old. For a man who reaches 70, the average life expectancy is about 84 years. That means retirement could easily last 2 decades or even longer. Now think about what that really means. If your savings were planned to last until age 78, but you live until 87, you could spend the final 9 years of your retirement relying almost entirely on the state pension. Those years may also be the time when healthcare needs increase, daily tasks become more difficult, and extra support becomes necessary. In other words, the period when you have the least money available could also be the time when your expenses are at their highest. This is one reason financial experts encourage people to plan for a longer retirement than they think they'll need. Having money left over later in life is far less risky than running out too soon. Recent research also shows that many people are becoming increasingly worried about this issue. A study released by the Social Market Foundation in early 2026 found that 54% of Generation X people now in their late 40s and 50s believe there's a real chance they will outlive their retirement savings. That's more than half of the people surveyed. Even more concerning, nearly half said they expect their retirement to be financially worse than their parents' retirement. Those concerns aren't coming from nowhere. Rising living costs, longer life expectancy, and uncertainty about future pension support have made many people question whether they're truly prepared. Then there's another major expense that often receives far less attention than it deserves: long-term care. Many people assume that once they've paid taxes throughout their working lives, the NHS will cover most of their needs later in life. The reality is more complicated. The NHS covers medical treatment and healthcare services, but it generally does not pay for long-term residential care, assisted living, or ongoing personal care if someone can no longer live independently. Those costs usually fall on the individual. Financial support from the local authority is available only after a means test, and eligibility depends on the value of your income and assets. Until then, many people are expected to pay for their own care, and the costs can be substantial. Current estimates suggest that someone who spends about 3 years in a typical UK care home could face total expenses of £120,000 to £180,000. For most families, that's an amount they never expected to budget for. It can quickly reduce savings that took decades to build. In some cases, people are forced to sell their homes or use much of their remaining wealth simply to pay for the care they need. What's surprising is that many retirement plans don't include these potential costs at all. People often focus on everyday living expenses such as food, utility bills, transport, and housing. But if long-term care becomes necessary, those earlier estimates may no longer reflect reality. That's why experts continue to remind people that retirement planning isn't only about the years immediately after leaving work. It's also about preparing for the later stages of life when additional support may become necessary. So if you've been watching this and some of these numbers feel familiar, you're certainly not alone. Maybe you've already noticed that your monthly spending is climbing faster than your income. Maybe retirement is getting closer and you're wondering whether your savings will actually be enough. Or perhaps you're already retired and finding it harder each year to make everything fit within your budget. The good news is that there are still practical steps you can take. Some of them can increase your income without requiring you to work longer or dramatically change your lifestyle. In the next section, we'll look at some of the most important actions pensioners and future retirees can take right now to strengthen their financial position and avoid missing out on money they may already be entitled to. So, what can you actually do if you're worried about your retirement income? The first step is one of the easiest, yet it's also one of the most overlooked. Make sure you're claiming every benefit you're entitled to. Many people assume that if they qualify for government support, they will automatically receive it. Unfortunately, that's not always how the system works. Thousands of eligible pensioners never submit a claim, which means they miss out on money that could make a real difference to their monthly budget. One of the biggest examples is pension credit. Recent estimates suggest that around 880,000 pensioners who qualify for pension credit are not claiming it. That's a huge number of people leaving money unclaimed. On average, pension credit and the extra support connected to it can be worth close to £3,900 a year. For someone living on a tight budget, that amount could help pay energy bills, cover food costs, or reduce financial stress throughout the year. And pension credit often opens the door to additional support. Depending on your circumstances, it may help with council tax, housing costs, or other forms of financial assistance that many people don't realize they're eligible for. Another important benefit is attendance allowance. This payment is designed for older people who need extra help because of a disability or long-term health condition. What's important to know is that it is not means tested, so your savings or income do not automatically prevent you from qualifying. It is also tax-free. For those who are eligible, attendance allowance can provide up to £5,959 each year. Yet around 1 million pensioners are believed to be missing out simply because they haven't applied. That's money that could help pay for extra care, household support, transportation, or other everyday needs. Council tax reduction is another area worth checking. Many pensioners qualify for discounts or reductions but never claim them. Depending on where you live and your financial situation, this could reduce your yearly council tax bill by hundreds or even thousands of pounds. These aren't new government programs. They're benefits that already exist today. The challenge is that many eligible people simply don't know they qualify or assume they won't be approved. That's why taking a little time to review your situation could have a much bigger impact than you expect. The second step is to rethink how long your retirement income needs to last. People often underestimate how many years they'll spend in retirement. A safer approach is to plan for a longer life rather than a shorter one. If you're a woman retiring around age 65, it may be wise to prepare your finances with age 90 in mind. If you're a man retiring at 65, planning until around 87 can provide a more realistic timeline. No one can predict exactly how long they'll live, but planning for extra years gives you a much better chance of avoiding financial problems later in life. Running out of money at 78 because you only planned for 13 years of retirement can create serious hardship. Having some savings left at the end of your life is generally a much better outcome than running out too early. This longer view should also shape many of the financial decisions you make before retirement. Questions like, when should you start claiming your state pension? Should you save more while you're still working? Would increasing your ISA contributions help? How should you use your private pension or other savings? These decisions become much more important when you consider that your retirement could last 20 years or more. The third step is to think carefully about where you plan to retire. For many people, location is about family, friends, and lifestyle. Those are all important reasons. But finances should also be part of the conversation. Living in one part of the country instead of another can change your yearly expenses by thousands of pounds. Housing costs, everyday bills, transport, and especially long-term care costs can vary dramatically between regions. Over the course of retirement, those differences could add up to tens or even hundreds of thousands of pounds. For couples who have flexibility about where they live, choosing a more affordable location could significantly improve their long-term financial security. Of course, money isn't the only factor that matters. Being close to loved ones, healthcare services, and a supportive community can also play a major role in quality of life. The key is to balance both emotional and financial considerations before making a final decision. So let's bring everything together. The latest research paints a clear picture. The full new state pension currently falls short of the income experts believe is needed for even a basic standard of living. Around 1.2 million pensioners rely on that pension alone, leaving many with little room to handle rising costs. Retirement expenses also vary widely depending on where you live, with some regions, especially London, being far more expensive than others, particularly when it comes to long-term care. Government advisors have warned that future retirees may face even greater financial pressure unless meaningful improvements are made. People are also living longer than many retirement plans assume, making careful financial planning more important than ever. And one of the biggest costs many families overlook is long-term care, which is generally not covered by the NHS and can place a heavy financial burden on individuals and their families. The encouraging news is that there are actions you can take today. Check whether you're receiving every benefit you're entitled to. Review your retirement plans with a realistic timeline. Consider how your location could affect your long-term costs. Small steps taken now can make a meaningful difference later. If you'd like to check your eligibility, you can contact Pension Credit 0800991234, Attendance Allowance 080073100122. Council tax reduction, contact your local council for information about available support. If you found this video helpful, consider subscribing for more updates on pensions, retirement, benefits, and changes that could affect your finances. And if you know someone who is already retired or plans to retire soon, share this video with them. The information could help them make better financial decisions and avoid missing out on support they're entitled to. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.